the gaucho of Brazil and of the world.
A book by Valmir Zanelato.
With tales, anecdotes, poems,
Chronicles,
compositions. Here begins this new book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Through this page, I send a fraternal embrace to all my esteemed friends who are engaged in the daily toil throughout our Brazil, day after day, during our walk through life. Everything we know and what we learn from everyone, especially when it comes to art, comes through the influence of those whom we consider examples and choose as idols. And it was, with absolute certainty, due to this intense coexistence that I was influenced on my journey by these great people who are my idols and friends. For this reason, at the end of this book, I could not fail to mention some of these names that come to my mind, not wishing, in any way, to diminish those who are not included on this page. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. With lyrics, verses, and compositions, the tradition of the southern lands. Looking from the outside, it is with longing that I recall the folklore dance groups of my homeland from the days when, around the ground fire, time did not seem to pass. The pios and the prendas danced until very close to sunrise, and it seems I can still hear the plaintive sound of the old little accordion, which, from afar, could be heard in the silence of the dawn. For those who arrived from outside, very little of it all they understood. A group of young women and young men. The breaking of day was already near. They danced around the fire. As did they, the flame burned. A dance of Rio Grande, with pride and gallantry. Around the ground fire, stubbornly an accordion could be heard, followed by the voice of the accordion player. In a chorus in counterpoint, they sang of their deeds and bravado. The song could be heard from afar. It stirred the people and the land. The sound swept across the hills. Hail Rio Grande do Sul, the land of the farrapos, of the people who live here and who cultivate tradition, united by their homeland, their most exalted passion. Hail Gaucho Rio Grande, the land of the farrapos. Dancing around the bonfire, on the fire the barbecue burned. Chimarrão was never lacking. Cachaca, dance, and joy. There one could see the gauchos. There Rio Grande knew that Brazil was dancing, that a single dream existed. For those who arrived from outside, very little of it all they understood. A group of young women and young men. The breaking of day was already near. They danced around the fire. As did they, the flame burned. A dance of Rio Grande, with pride and gallantry. Hail Rio Grande do Sul, the land of the farrapos, of the people who live here and who cultivate tradition, united by their homeland, their most exalted passion. Hail Gaucho Rio Grande, the land of the farrapos. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Insecure. This theme once again refers to the living soul who, when far from his beloved, feels himself only half whole. I am a confident gaucho who stumbles here and there when far from my homeland, or even a little distant from you. What leaves me weakened is what is called and known as longing, heartache, for someone far from oneself. I turn my thoughts back to my native land, and two endless longings come to me. I casually exchange your name for the name of someone else. If I find myself displaced, away from my soil, I do not feel right. Even though I feel whole and well treated where I am, I miss the prenda and the scent of my ground, of my state. And there is no use even trying to sweeten my lips. There are things that only exist when one is at home. So I remember the old homeland, the fig tree, the green pasture, on Sundays lying there, in its shade, in your embraces. Your hair upon my face, turn the green into saddle blankets. How could it be possible to remain far from such attachments? A heart finds no peace, far from the enchantments of the prenda and the homeland. My strength only returns when, over the mountain range, from afar I begin to glimpse my longed-for land. With the wind whistling among the rolling hills and ravines, the swaying of the grasses reminds me of my beloved's hair. Anyone who finds himself far from his homeland and from his beloved prenda will understand well what I speak of. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, lady of the common folk. Life and the customs of the countryside, wherever we may be, we never fail to notice them. At dusk, the POs return to the ranch, and there they resume all the tasks that, tirelessly and repeatedly, will be carried out until the end of their days. Night is arriving. The sun is going away. It was one of those days. It was very full indeed. I will return home to those whom I love, with a peaceful soul, with the mission fulfilled. Every late afternoon, as is the custom, the little bell tolls, there from the bell tower, and the Ave Maria, in the church or on the radios, from afar it is heard, there in my backlands. Ave Maria, Lady of the common folk, listen to your servants, hear their affliction. We sing to you, hear our song. O Our Lady, extend your hand. Hope is renewed in the soul of the PO. Little is the novelty here upon this land of mine. There are prayers and novenas. There at my neighbor's, there is also a fair on the weekend. And the Ave Maria, in the church or on the radios, from afar it is heard. There in my backlands, Ave Maria, Lady of the common folk, listen to your servants, hear their affliction. When rain is lacking, a procession is made, God is asked, that rain may then fall. But otherwise all is well. There is even chimarreo, to gather the pianata, to warm the heart. And when in the homeland there is a procession, the people gather with faith and devotion. And the Ave Maria, in the church or on the radios, from afar it is heard. There in my backlands, Ave Maria, Lady of the common folk, listen to your servants, hear their affliction. To the heavens rises a song in chorus, asking for everyone, without restriction. Hope is renewed in the soul of the PO. Little is the novelty here upon this land of mine. Night is arriving. The sun is going away. It was one of those days. It was very full indeed. And the Ave Maria, in the church or on the radios, from afar it is heard. There in my backlands, Ave Maria, Lady of the common folk, listen to your servants, hear their affliction. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, Bohemia of a gaucho. Here follow memories of times gone by, of when what mattered most were friendships, romances, and long nights of endless parties. It did not matter whether one had money to spend, for when one friend had it, the others had it too. and my days as a peon quickly went by. They passed through me. Of them, today, longing is what overwhelms me. It drags me far away. Everything was left behind. From those times of long ago, only longing is what remained. From that good life I lived, from the dances of my homeland, from the most beautiful young women whom I never forgot, from friends and festivities, from my good days lived, from rodeo to rodeo, from dreams and lassoings. From the circles of friends, only shapes and shadows remained. Bohemia, Bohemia, only of Bohemia do I live now. Bohemia, Bohemia, all that remained were the nights of today's Bohemia. Bohemia, Bohemia, only from Bohemia do I live now. They were nothing more than dreams that on the long road one day were lost. And the old friends I once had, where are they all? Only Bohemia remained, Bohemia of small taverns, which I relive now in swallows of cane liquor. My old plans, slowly lost, became worn away. They were lost to the wind on the long journey. They were left behind. All went their own way. Only the dream remained, and today it has returned inside my chest to soothe the longing. It is longing, the mad desire to be young once again. Today I no longer can, for I left behind, far away, my time, forgotten in longing, my old images of my happy days. Bohemia, Bohemia, only of Bohemia do I live now. Bohemia, Bohemia, all that remained were the nights of today's Bohemia. Bohemia, Bohemia, only from Bohemia do I live now. Food was never lacking. Everything that existed we shared. Tomorrow did not matter. Only our dreams were what counted. Of serenades and accordion tunes, guitars and night songs, our days were made. Hunger was never felt. There was only joy. Sadness did not exist. The nights would pass. Dawn would come. The day would break. Everything was only celebration. We did what life asked of us. Life was lived to be happy. That was what we did. We were happy, and only today do I know what before I did not know. Bohemia, Bohemia, only of Bohemia do I live now. Bohemia, Bohemia, all that remained were the nights of today's Bohemia. Bohemia, Bohemia, only from Bohemia do I live now. And in swallows of cane liquor is how I live now. It is in swallows of cane liquor how I live now. Bohemia, Bohemia, only of Bohemia do I live now. Bohemia, Bohemia, all that remained were the nights of today's Bohemia. Bohemia, Bohemia, only from Bohemia do I live now. That is how I live now. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Crow's Banquet. These lyrics were especially composed for the gaucho friend Manuel Cassiano and were recorded on his 5th CD, Beauties of the South. Playing and singing verses, raising quite a commotion, clinging to the accordion like a dog to a bone, making a great racket, and warning the people that everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. In a little gaucho hop, beating the sole of the boot, making the lantern sway, the crowd all bow-legged. They sing and shout with the accordion player, stomping with no restraint, that everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. In this rhythm the snobs, mixing among the people, stuffed into their baggy pants, with a silly, egg-eater face, whispering, squeezing the girl, well away from her father, that everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. From every rustic radio, I sent a message to the people, talking about the fad, and about this fancy dancing, and how at many dances, I saw them pointing at one another, saying, "You're dancing, like at a crow's banquet." Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. At the dances where I went, I gave fair warning, and at every rodeo, I played and sang once more, but seeing everyone dancing, I'll stop being stubborn and start dancing, like at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Come on, my people. Everyone back into the rhythm. Shake the skeleton, shake off fleas and lice, together with this accordion player of the people. Sing while stamping your feet, like at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Everyone is dancing, as at a crow's banquet. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. It is nothing new that, wherever one goes, from one moment to the next a pack of dogs can be seen fighting. Some want to snatch the bone from this one or that one, even knowing the bone does not belong to them. So I wrote this message for the hungry big dogs out there, barking and yelping, trying to take someone else's bone. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, but my bone you will never take. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, of my bone you will never taste. My life has always been hard. From sunup to sundown, I always worked. I earned little, but little became much. From very early on, I always saved. Now look at how some cursed envious ones, day and night covet what I planted. They snarl at me like mad dogs. I sing to them the verses I created. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, but my bone you will never take. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, of my bone you will never taste. I can't show up with a new car, or they point fingers and say I stole it. To disguise it, I turn my baggy pants inside out and say the new boots were resold. They whisper, talk, grumble rudely. With greedy eyes they all pounce on me. I open my throat to everyone's despair. I hear the growling, and then I sing to them like this. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, but my bone you will never take. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, of my bone you will never taste. They say I don't deserve my achievements, that it was pure luck, even the woman I found, that I'm ugly, that success came by chance, that I'm just lazy and never worked, and all I've taken is abuse on my back. It's all envy of me, that I know well. I puff out my chest and sing along. For the loudmouths, some verses I made. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, but my bone you will never take. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, of my bone you will never taste. And at this steady trot I carry life forward. I sing for everyone and everyone likes me. With good friends I party day and night, always dodging the clashes with the freeloader. But I warn you, don't scatter the embers. With a short stick, don't poke or provoke me, because if one day I lose my patience, I'll beat them all with a sausage whipping. then yes, that day I won't care to hear the pack of dogs barking. But that sausage beating, my people, is what they like best, right? So for that bunch, let's shout it to the world and sing. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, but my bone you will never take. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark, of my bone you will never taste. Let them bark, you pack of dogs. Let them bark. With sausage, that's how we'll beat you. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world.
De bertussi legend.
For those who have not yet been to São Jorge de Malata, where the Bertussi brothers' farm and statues are located, near Craiova and São Marcos, I leave here my invitation. There you will find and experience true hospitality and the purest customs of the gaucho from the highlands of the Serra. Even the Malata backlands changed after the place was stirred by the famous duo, the Bertussi brothers. For the entire old homeland acclaimed, this pair of accordion players who conquered the whole world. From Craiova to the end of the world, the news spread in the sound of the Bertussi accordion that conquered the world by voice and bellows. An obelisk in front of the farm today is part of this landscape, along with the manor of their father Fioravant, the encourager of these two brave brothers, and of Juvelina, the loving mother, whom today we remember with great longing. From Craiova to the end of the world, the news spread in the sound of the Bertussi accordion that conquered the whole world. There even runs a rumor in the surroundings that honeides voiced duets with Adelar on full moon nights from the obelisk where he begins to sing, beside the statues right in front of the farm, when Adelar starts to play. It was from Craiova to the end of the world that Rio Grande grew in greatness, from the old band and the Bertussi brothers, making all their children today feel proud. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Mamangava. There on Jacaré Road, in the municipality of Torres at the Nunes farmstead, there existed the so-called Bolicho do Gauderio, where, at least once a week, a good-natured crowd would gather, and where scuffles happened that no one could imagine unless they were there to enjoy, witness, and later tell. It went more or less like this. In a scuffle there at the Bolicho, the Gauderio almost lost his boots, for there appeared an accordion player, a fellow with crooked horns, whipping his accordion with 1.5 meters of grease, on his drunken perch, buzzing like a mamangava, and that's when the Gauderio's dance floor, in the dark night, turned into dust and smoke. No sooner had he begun to play than he got stuffed with cachaca, with the bottle under the bench. He pulled out a sack of crackers and another hunk of sausage from the pocket of his bombacha, shouting, "The night is ours, good-hearted gauchada. Grease up your shins, for this accordion will either play or burst." And the Mamangava accordionist grumbled well soaked, with the face of a rascal. Cross-eyed, he kept watch from the corner where he stood, the whole crowd trotting, shaking the floorboards, with their dancing through the hall. Stuffed up to the ears, he put on a macho face, drooling over the accordion, like a motherless calf, wedged into the chair. Hidden behind the bombacha, he He grabbed a glass of cane liquor, where he soaked the crackers, biting, sucking a bit, of the little broth of cachaca. He sucked with delight the soaked cracker. It gave work to the tongue, his toothless mouth. Everyone covered in disgust, but no one said a word. He tore through the night singing, sang until dawn, his buzzing grumble, like a mamangava. And the mamangava accordionist grumbled well soaked. With the face of a rascal, cross-eyed, he kept watch from the corner where he stood, the whole crowd trotting, shaking the floorboards, with their dancing through the hall. This is the true story, my people, from the Bolicho do Gauderio. And far away, as I was already heading down the road, I could still hear the accordionist's buzz. I was almost forgetting. The Gauderio had to stay at the Bolicho until the end of the scuffle and, from what I later heard, ended up having to sleep there as well, because the mamangava accordionist had nowhere to stay that night, and the Gauderio ended up getting drunk purely out of solidarity with the accordionist. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Prayer of an accordion player. A tribute to a great accordion player, my close friend, who always took his profession very seriously, this being a mission destined to him by God. Not even time has made me forget the good days already lived, always beside my beloved woman and surrounded by my dear children, sweet images that follow me, yet far from them life is torment. I even forget that I exist. Only of them do I not forget a single moment. A strong gaucho raised in struggle. This toil has always been my life. The sun of my homeland does not scorch me. Only my beloved is the one who makes me melt. My good children are my roots, living memory of our history, always honoring the name of the accordion player, who through millennia will remain in history. The little boy and my little prenda are continuations of my days, along with my other two beloved children. All are gifts God gave me. One takes care of the farm, the other sings of deeds and glory, of this family from the highlands, that in the mountains forged its story. The old prenda, lady of the ranch, always putting up with my squeaks, traced her fate with this Gauderio, whom God placed upon her path, and this flower perfumes my home, intoxicating all my days. But if she scolds and shows the whip, I turn into a lamb, her slave. And I go on living my sweet days, farm, children, and my beloved. Only one tribute is still missing, but they told me it is already underway. It is a memorial on the highlands, a statue of me and of one brother of mine. I ask you, gauchota friends, is there anyone happier than I? This prayer that today I sing was given to me by a friend, drawn from the depths of his heart, according to the order God gave him. I shall sing it for all my days, forgetting not a single moment. The prayer of the accordion man that echoes through all times. It was God who gave me this mission, and I shall carry it on until the end of my days, always beside those who love me and whom I shall never forget. My heartfelt thanks to all my great friends. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, a gaucho in all of us. To feel or to be a gaucho, nothing more is required than what is inside you. That is, for your soul to feel gaucho, to like and love the things and customs of your land. It does not matter where you were born, nor where you live, nor even where you will live. A gaucho will always be a gaucho, no matter where he may be. There is a gaucho in all of us. There is a gaucho in all of us, poorly, well, or badly dressed, drinking or not the bitter brew from the chimarrao gourd. I am a carefree gaucho. I am a carefree gaucho, roped in by sheer grit, addicted to cachaca of custom and tradition. On the radio or on television, at shed fandangos, an energy flows, the cult of this cachaca, an inheritance of tradition. There is a gaucho in all of us. There is a gaucho in all of us, poorly, well, or badly dressed, drinking or not the bitter brew from the chimarrao gourd. I am a carefree gaucho. I am a carefree gaucho, roped in by sheer grit, addicted to cachaca of custom and tradition. On the radio or on television, I invite you from the heart, preserve this custom, fill your chest, and sing, together with pride, this song. There is a gaucho in all of us. There is a gaucho in all of us, poorly, well, or badly dressed, drinking or not the bitter brew from the chimarrao gourd. I am a carefree gaucho. I am a carefree gaucho, roped in by sheer grit, addicted to cachaca of custom and tradition. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, the sweet sour cachaca. In the tales and stories of country taverns, something funny always comes up. Some sing, others improvise verses. The lyrics below were entrusted to me by one of these men who does not wish to be identified, but wants his story to be known. Drinking a caipirinha, feeling the ground rise beneath me, I toss my tongue to the side, from the glass the sour lemon that insists on getting into my mouth, spoiling my digestion of the sweet sour cachaca with lemon juice. I declared war on food, lettuce, chayote, watercress, with turnip, carrot, and cassava. I walk around very suspicious. They will never enter this body to spoil my digestion of the sweet sour cachaca with lemon juice. Just so I won't say I don't eat, I carry with me the illusion of a rare pork loin or a flank steak instead, which I let enter this mouth to spoil my digestion of the sweet sour cachaca with lemon juice. And if you, O my countrymen, have the same intention as I do, I tell you, you are lost. You carry a curse on your back. If you only think of having in your mouth, to aid digestion, the sweetness of sour cachaca, we're both going the wrong way. But let us not fall into despair. Let us drink another strong shot. We are great partners, drunkards by the bottle, and only we men know about secrets and seduction, that every sweet-smelling woman only goes for a heavy drinker. But I advise you, countrymen, drop the damned habit, for the womenfolk might change their minds and no longer like a drunkard. And I also can't risk so much competition. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, my story. My story, for those who truly know the ways of the countryside, is a faithful portrait of the life of an indigenous man raised deep in the ravine lands. He knows neither fair weather nor rainy days, for he is always bound to the fields and only returns to the ranch at dusk. There, with his family, he first drinks his chimarrao, and on weekends, at rodeos and at festivities with the ranch hands, he picks up his accordion and vents on the little squeeze box the sorrows of hard times gone by. My story here I will tell you. It is of a brave native born atop the highlands, like a young steer in the fields I was raised. I became one of those bulls who takes hits and does not bellow. I was weaned and halter broken in the yoke. Driving cattle, that is how I was raised. Loose in the fields, always singing my verses, until one day I crossed paths with my destiny. I was roped in by the cry of an accordion and by songs that came crossing borders. In them stamped the saga and the bertussi legend, with prose and verses of this proud family. I followed their steps amid circling horse herds. In little time I found my path, imprisoned by the straps of the accordion. Alongside theirs I traced my own road. I live my days always playing and singing. I make happy all those I pass by. I cross the country and go beyond borders, making friends. I forget pain and weariness. But from time to time I turn my face toward my homeland. Longing strikes for Malata, beloved land. I turn my horse and return along the same trail, to my soil, to my beloved ranch. When there I am happy and carefree, together with my children in the warmth of my land, near the woman who is always waiting for me, with her embrace and serving me bitter mate. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, my giving. Each person has their own fate, and the accordion player, despite the hardships and longings he carries in his heart, often lets the accordion express his emotions. Of everything I sing today, little remains to be said. Even though I say little, everyone already knows of this path of mine, my world to wander. I'm made of singing and the accordion, the reason for my living. Everyone thinks it very easy, but only those know the suffering. The wandering accordion players who persist in this way of life, with yearning and without shelter to soften the pain. For only with a good evening and a may I enter does one find a place to stay and something to eat. If each one has a fate, mine is to sing. If for the bee there is the flower, my work is my giving. Only those who live tasting honey do not taste the bitter. Only a working bee feels the bitterness in the mouth. Of everything I sing today, little remains to be said. Even though I say little, everyone already knows of this path of mine, of my world to wander. I'm made of singing and the accordion, the reason for my living. Begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. I am the South. I composed this poem especially to take part in the Estancia de Poesia Crioula contest, with the awards ceremony held at Parque de Harmonia in June 2014 in Porto Alegre. Here, land and man blend together, for man without the land does not live, and the land without man merely wanders without meaning. When they finally realized I was already here, they arrived little by little, clearing what before were fields and native forests. This land had no owner, yet little by little the news brought more people here, and this remote homeland, one would never say, would one day become what it is today. Whether I did right or wrong, my instinct is what prevailed. I opened my own trails, no matter the direction. I made with my own breast the nest. For the dense population, only the good I planted here, and I looked very little at those who stayed outside. Little was left for them, for those here to enjoy. What once was good, then became even better. The land was trampled, yet the past did not fail. With the immigrants, may I enter? Everything here was renewed, Everyone exalted it. Here it was always the Lord, the one who sheltered all. The payment was sweat, to live here in peace. With the coming of foreigners, mixing with the natives, here they were welcomed, here they were made compatriots. And in these ends of the world, one never set aside, doing good to them. And the natives of this land, who before were passive, then came to know a war previously unknown. Well, but that is not all. That is a thing of the past. We must cast it aside and look only at the positive. We gain knowledge. The native became aware of all that was learned, and now with more love, engaged with the white man, giving more value to the land. Sooner he then became a people. Not that all the beauties of this land today have been shaped, but the old dawn, the good times of long ago, have much to do today with everything that exists now, and everything spoken here. Accent, languages, customs, is still cradled in cradles. All that once was. And I always in silence, not speaking of values, letting slowly sprout what one day would cease to be merely a dream, to be only nostalgia. And I, who stayed awake through nights, lived from this bohemia. Reality took shape. Everything here was conceived, even what I never imagined. Here came the wagons, before them, however, the horses. After a long interval, settlement began. This promised land, which as in a dream, gathering from other homelands, gave its people a place. By the nickname of gaucho, they then began to call the brave ones of this homeland. Time went dragging on. Only those who were here noticed, with affection and much love, their children growing here, who lovingly became attached. I who saw everything, how their efforts were harnessed, and drawing everything from the land, owing nothing to anyone, becoming more and more gauchos. This is the narrative. This is my story. Better than I, no one knows it. Better than I, no one tells it. For I am the owner of this story. In this story is recalled the epic of the gauchos, which many tell to many, and my telling of this land, which recalls past times, in part one tell in these verses. Much time passed, for a little to be known, that one might search in time, our days of glory, that would make us proud of our past history, my children, for I am one, the one who tells it now. I am one who sprouted here, who narrates this story here. I am also the South. I am Rio Grande. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. In today's days, much of everything is talked about, but very little ends up truly being known. That is what happens with our people, who hear a lot and find themselves little aware of reality. These lyrics speak of the illusory reality in which man finds himself. In today's days, very little is already known about today's days, when everything is spoken of and everything is known. Very little truth ends up being known, and thus the world walks in this direction of everything, but very few knowing the everything, and that is what counts, what keeps being said, so that the many may not know. Crossing the lands, from far away came what arrived here, the fashions, the customs of distant peoples. Here they arrived little by little. They are branching out, like a vine, swallowing people. What a short time ago was only a light rumor, is everything that is now heard here. What are we to do? Who will tell us what is right and wrong? whether man should be a hired hand or a boss, or live a life like cattle, one thing or another. Who should know what man will be? It is the root and time that will tell us. Who here will become what? Every day it is in the air. There is in the singing a message to our people, who know well from where their origin and their way of being came, which does not please many, those who know very little about themselves, but which gladdens many, the many who surrender, who hear little of themselves. Just walk through the fields, feel the charms of what is lived here, to be able to feel what the hearts of those born here feel. So then, compatriot, it does not matter, these slammings of doors, and let it be made very clear that our good knowledge is what makes us want to be a man or cattle. Between being cattle and being a man, men are what we want to be, to live what is right and true, to stay aware of how life is lived here, of the good or the bad that is lived here. One who lives what one day he learned must stay attentive and improve in his days, to be able to live much better. For in today's days, very little is already known about today's days, when everything is spoken of and everything is known. Very little truth ends up being known, and thus the world walks in this direction of everything, but very few knowing the everything, and that is what counts, what keeps being said, so that the many may not know. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world.
A ser tão salve.
In the many dance gatherings played by gilney bertussi in the most diverse corners of our country and beyond, I observed the interesting expressions of each people, which greatly caught my attention. So I decided to share with all friends a bit of what I heard. Playing everywhere, amid the bustle with the common folk, one hears at every moment shouts throughout the hall, foot stomping and spinning in the dances of my homeland, together with gilney bertussi and the group Nova Jerusalem. At a German festivity in the south of this land of ours, the priest asked for the floor with his German accent. Today nobody will leave. There is fandango in the hall, accordion of gurney pertussa, and the group Nova Generation. Also in the lands of the north, the land of the king of Baiao, the enthusiastic people grabbed to speak in the hall. Accent, nobody's leaving, there's Zaxado in the hall, singing of Zerny Pertussi, and the group Nova Zerakeo. And over toward the lands of Minas, I felt great excitement from the cheerful miners, whispering in loud voices. You and I, today we ain't leaving, let's spin in the hall, with the singer Gurney Bertussi, and that group Jerusalem. In the Portuguese colony of the Silvas and Araguaios, the fellows all puffed up with the girls hand in hand, dragging their tongues, Manuel, Joaquim, and Joao. Today there's Gurney Bertussa and the group Nova Zerakeo. They were also hired by a group from Japan who, speaking, pointed right in their direction, saying, "It's a good party, right? No lack of dragons, with this gilney bertussi and the group Nova Generation." And so everywhere, amid the bustle with the common folk, what is most heard there are shouts throughout the hall, foot stomping and spinning in the dances of my homeland, together with gilney bertussi and the group Nova Jerusalem. And the group returned to its homeland, full of reason and pride. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world.
Message to bertussi asterisco asterisco.
Here is a supposed message from the drover of gaucho music to all his fans and friends spread throughout this world of God. What can this singer leave to his people if not his verses with his way of singing? This is all I have to offer. Much more than this I would like to leave to everyone. This is not much, but it is all I know how to do. This is the trotting rhythm that my father taught me. With the clarinet, and I, with my accordion, it was that a new sound was created in the South. It was with my father playing with his band that in the beginning I could learn a little. However, my fear was that of my mother, who, with her whip, would make me run. I wish I could give you more than a song, but this alone is the best I know how to do. In this halting song that I make today, for whoever listens to me, listen, it is the best I know how to do. In my rodeos, CDGS, or gaucho gatherings, I carry the song of a dearly loved family. This is the voice of a gaucho drover who in this land leaves his registered mark. This is all the best that I learned, and I pass it on as it should be done. Much more will come from that which one day gave, who gave everything without wanting much in return. Therefore, only the song is what I leave you, for this is my greatest knowledge. This singer's dream will only be worth it if a seed remains to survive. But on a day when I say goodbye, tighten the bonds, make Rio Grande come together. Pray my verses day and night, through the night, in these songs to lull Rio Grande to sleep. Never forget, gauchos of my land, to honor your beloved land, to bend your knees before the tradition of the land, in a prayer to St. George of the Mule Train. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Formerly ****. It is with great longing that I recall the fandangos and the parties of long ago. People came from all sides, and the gauchada had fun until dawn. Formerly, in times not so long past, people knew more of what happened in the backlands. If a fandango was held in the village, all relatives and neighbors would come. There was no talk of expenses, of who would pay. What mattered was friendship, gratitude. There was no talk of expenses, of who would pay. What mattered was friendship, gratitude. But if we look nowadays to both sides, none of this do we see anymore. But if we look nowadays to both sides, none of this do we see anymore. Formerly, in times not so long past, if there was a festivity in the village, there was novena, fair, fireworks, dedications, barbecue, accordion, and auction. There the godfathers and godmothers would meet, who for a long time had not seen each other. There the godfathers and godmothers would meet, who for a long time had not seen each other. But if we look nowadays to both sides, none of this we will see anymore. But if we look nowadays to both sides, none of this we will see anymore. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. The best piece of land ****. This is another theme that speaks of and exalts the southern land. Forgive me for not keeping silent in what I say, but what I see, what I feel, does not even fit within me. It is the beauty that surrounds my days, that makes my silence explode, causing a stir. It is the beauty that springs from this land, the brunettes, the blondes of my south. They make me think this is the best part of the world, the green grass, the cattle, the blue sky. Forgive me, those who do not live here, who do not know, do not recognize this place. They have not yet seen. Good people, friendly people, fruit of this land that was born only to love it. It is people who live like people just like us, like the grape that gives us the best wine. They tread the fields and are like the fields themselves, who from purity made their goodness, their love. I want to forget that there is a misunderstanding, that what I say is only stubbornness, only in me. But what I feel springs from soul and heart, things of the land that the land made this way. I know that each one speaks of their own and wants to be heard. Forgive me, I say, I do not even know if this is the right time. It is what happens with me and my feeling. It is not pride. I am like an open door. Forgive my manners, my way of speaking. I ask that you not be offended. I did not wish to offend anyone. I invite you. Come, see the beauties here. Likewise, you will feel like we do. I have love for my land all around me, for my country, in whose bosom I live. I am part of it. I am part of this land. I am Brazil. I live here. I am of this place. I say that this is the best part of the land, where everyone should have been born by mistake. Other years have 1 year and nothing more. Ours has well over 1,000 days per year. I feel that this is the best part of the land. Any season is the best season of the year. Here there is everything. The land gives us in abundance. It is where everyone would have liked to be born by mistake. I say that this is the best part of the land, where everyone should have been born by mistake. Other years have 1 year and nothing more. Ours has well over 1,000 days per year. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world, exalting Rio Grande. These verses came to me on a day when I found myself far from my beloved land, and no longer able to bear the longing for everything I had left behind. In thought and dreaming of my pago, this poem emerged. Old banner of hope, pride of our state, wherever I may go, I always feel you by my side. You are the pride of the gauchos, the comfort of the wronged, O my Rio Grande do Sul. When far away from you, all I think of is returning. The longing is so great, I only think of embracing again, returning to the gauchada, to the people of my place. I love you, Southern land. There are no words that can say, that can truly explain, to speak of our beauties, of our dawns, of where I was raised, the land of goodwill, pride of our state. There are the most beautiful prendas, the bravest pios, the most productive lands, the most humane human beings. The gaucho is hospitable, fruit of the finest seed, my pride, my Rio Grande. In Farrapos week, the gauchada gathers. Even the bad weather of harsh past history is forgotten. Only bravery is celebrated, of the people of the beloved land, of the brave curus of the South. Very little is enough to speak of Rio Grande, its lands, fame, and glories that have long expanded, crossing its borders, showing the great worth of the owners of this Rinco. Wherever one may walk, one steps upon history. Every inch of its soil has its tale of glory. That land has memory. My South has a great history. I love you, Southern land. The gaucho is very brave, never fled from the struggle, and even with all the fame, is a simple people without luxury. Out there they see our Brazil as the country of gauchos, soil of a renowned people. When they notice I am from the South, I am treated much better. Out of worth or out of respect, they make way, step aside. They want to hear our song. So with an open chest, I sing the deeds of my pago. Everywhere on earth, The gaucho is recognized, has an upright bearing, the bearing of the fearless. Everyone knows this pago. Brazil is known as the land of the gaucho. Here begins a new page of this book. The gaucho of Brazil and of the world, when one day, when the living legend of Rio Grande is no longer among us, his voice will most certainly continue echoing through all the pagos of this world, and something more or less like this will always be heard from him. I cry out with Rio Grande. I cry out with the gauchos. My life has always been this trotting. I am the drover of gaucho music. I am a bertussi. I am old Adelar. One day when I am gone, my song will continue. The gaucho will keep singing. Rio Grande will keep singing. In the singing of every mouth, with them I will be singing. One day when to my people I can no longer sing, it will be heard to the four winds, in every corner and every place. In every chord and every mouth, my song will be sung. I will sing with the wind that sings everywhere, with the voice of a child or of an old man remembering, wandering through his old age, telling stories of Adelar. My song in every corner, in all corners will be found, for many and many years, and even more it will make everyone remember. My son gilney bertussi, who will always be there singing with me. I cry out with Rio Grande. I cry out with the gauchos. My life has always been this trotting. I am the drover of gaucho music. I am a bertussi. I am old Adelar. I cry out with Rio Grande. I cry out with the gauchos. My life has always been this trotting. I am the drover of gaucho music. I am a bertussi. I am old Adelar. I cry out with Rio Grande. I cry out with the gauchos. My life has always been this trotting. I am the drover of gaucho music. I am a bertussi. I am old Adelar. Here begins a new page of this book. The gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Good morning. Good morning, friendly gauchada. Good morning. On this day I wish you all much peace, health, and happiness. May everyone feel great joy. In this rhythm, let us celebrate together our friendship with everyone here, asking God that it may never be lacking. Always by our side a great friend, and to him and to all. Then I wish. Good morning, friendly gauchada. Good morning. On this day I wish you all much peace, health, and happiness. May everyone feel great joy. If it is day, look at the sky and see the sun. If it is afternoon, you have lived your full day. Wait for the night to celebrate. Have a drink and another, then go rest. But until then, let us all sing. Good morning, friendly gauchada. Good morning. On this day I wish you all much peace, health, and happiness. May everyone feel great joy. Good morning, friendly gauchada. Good morning. On this day I wish you all much peace, health, and happiness. May everyone feel great joy. Here begins a new page of this book. The gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Here is a little of one of the most beautiful stories ever recorded about an authentic Southern gaucho, the drover of gaucho music, the living legend of the pagos. Nothing is more pleasurable than telling a fragment of a story, especially when it speaks of a great gaderio, of an accordion-playing singer, of his composing, his playing, and his singing. As I bring this book to a close, I decided to make some remarks that certainly cannot be left out, so that more details may be known about the life of Adelar Bertussi. Exactly on the very last day of the first half of February 1933, with only a few hours remaining until the 16th, Adelar Bertussi was born on the lands of the Bertussi farm, which had been built by the farmer and maestro Fioravant himself, his son Adelar Bertussi. This took place in the region of Craiova, in São Jorge de Malata, where one of the greatest curists among gauchos and a most renowned accordionist, singer, and composer was born, a man who would bring, and still brings, many joys, honors, and glories to all gauchos, not only of Rio Grande do Sul, but from every corner of our great Brazil and much of the world. Son of Fioravant Bertussi and Juvelina Siqueira Bertussi, Adelar, from the time he was a young boy, like his father, the old tough Fioravant, carried within himself a special inclination, a great love, a strong and burning flame for the divine art of music. Being the youngest child of the couple, he had 3 brothers, Wilson, Valmore, and Honeide, the latter being the eldest, and with whom he would form the first gaucho accordion duo ever recorded, baptized with the name Hermeos Bertussi, Bertussi Brothers. From an early age, Adelar began to follow in the footsteps of the old man, his father. Besides being a prosperous farmer in the region of Malata, the immigrant Fioravant was also a musician and, around the year 1918, had become the leader and conductor of a band. Before that, the band had been led by Maestro Cornelius, a countryman who claimed to be from the region of Novo Hamburgo and who stayed in those parts for about 3 years, teaching his art to the local people. Likewise, the maestro also performed at celebrations and festivities throughout the surrounding areas and neighboring pagos. Adelar Bertussi, in addition to his constant life in rural work, performing the duties proper to a large farm, became familiar from an early age with many of the instruments of the band conducted by his father. It is worth noting that the first songs and melodies that reached his ears came through the first radio purchased by Mr. Fioravant, which was, at that time, the only one in those far-off regions, a model from the traditional Telefunken brand. The radio had been ordered and bought from a traveling salesman named Gasto Benetti, whose home was in the region of Caxias. Adelar was still very young at the time, which did not prevent him from being amazed by the novelty. It is said that the first station tuned by Gasto, on that memorable late afternoon, was Radio El Mundo from Buenos Aires, followed soon after by Radio Gaucha from Porto Alegre, Radio Tupi from Rio and Sao Paulo, Radio Nacional from Rio de Janeiro, and Radio Record. Through this broadcaster, the brothers grew up listening to great names of Sertania music in the voices of Jararaca and Ratinho, Os Tres Batutas, Alvarenga and Ranchinho, Raul Torres and Florencio, and the accordionist Rielli, among whose many successful songs stood out Mula Preta. Around that same time, Pedro Raimundo, in Porto Alegre, the cheerful gaucho of the radio, was beginning his successful trajectory with the songs Adiós, Mariana, and Sade de Laguna. In 1940, due to the enthusiasm of the youngsters in the household, old Fioravant formed his own band. Honeide played the accordion and Wilson played the clarinet, later switching to the saxophone. The group was baptized Dois Porungos Acoirados. Adelar, at 7 years of age, played the tambourine. His father Fioravant played the clarinet, and Valmore, who was not very interested in the group and only wanted to dance, was assigned to carry the bass drum and the drum kit. At only 10 years old, Adelar, quite self-assured, already played the cavaquinho with great skill. But it was at 14, in 1947, that he went through his first true test, when he began helping his brother Honeide, who was 10 years older, and played his first dance with him. At the time, Honeide was already well known and famous in the region, and the two played a carnival dance at Club Santa Cruz in Bom Jesus in the Serra Gaucha. In 1949, bursting with joy, Adelar Bertussi received his father's consent and began taking music lessons with Professor Waldomiro Torres do Valle. The following year, an accordion teacher from Italy arrived in Caxias do Sul, Leonardo Caffi. Both Adelar and Honeide, already with considerable knowledge, attended excellent lessons with Professor Caffi and refined their skills, including strengthening their connection with classical music. On April 24, 1948, in Porto Alegre, by initiative of João Carlos de Avila Paisao Cortés, the first Gaucho Tradition Center was founded, CTG 35. This date is remarkable, as 1 week earlier, at only 15 years of age, Adelar Bertussi had the responsibility of playing his first dance alone, since Honeide was hospitalized and forbidden by doctors from making any physical effort. On December 26, 1949, the duo was officially named Hermeos Bertussi by Alvaro Aquino during one of his radio programs in the city of Lagoa Vermelha. At that time, the brothers were passing through the city as part of their first tour through southern Santa Catarina. In 1952, with Adelar hitching a ride in a truck with Remy Steedile and Honeide with Ivo Chinalato, the brothers made their first trip to Sao Paulo, going, as the saying goes, with nothing but courage and determination. There, they stayed at Hotel Iguaçu. The next day, dressed in full gaucho attire as if they were on their own land, proud among the high society gentlemen and drawing attention everywhere they went, they visited the most important radio stations in search of an opportunity. They ended up visiting several record companies and appeared on Radio Tupi, Radio Nacional, and Radio Record, performing on various programs, which brought them considerable recognition and made them much more sought after from then on. The brothers returned to Sao Paulo in 1954, but advised by their friend Raul Torres, they decided to return to Rio Grande do Sul, where they would prepare a strong repertoire and attempt a more promising launch in Rio de Janeiro. Around that time, one afternoon while in Caxias do Sul, Honeide met an outsider, a fellow named Abel de Lemos, nephew of Mario Mascarenhas. Mascarenhas was well known for owning a famous accordion academy in Rio de Janeiro, and his nephew's visit to Caxias was driven by desperation. Mascarenhas was looking for a professional who could repair and tune his accordions in the marvelous city. At 5 a.m. on May 7th, 1954, bound for Rio de Janeiro, Honeide and Adelar Bertussi left hitchhiking with truck drivers from São Marcos. After several days of arduous travel, they arrived in Rio and stayed at Hotel Alameda in the Gloria neighborhood. As soon as they settled in, without wasting time, they headed to the Mascarenhas Academy, which at that time had more than 1,200 students and 27 teachers. Honeide, in the very first days, began repairing and tuning the many accordions that were idle at the institution. Recognizing the value of the gauchos, Mascarenhas introduced them, through friends, to perform in the best venues in Rio. Soon after, with the rise of the duo's reputation, They were contracted by TV and Radio Tupi and were interviewed by the very famous magazine of the time, O Cruzeiro. From there, they formed friendships with important figures, including journalist David Nasser, Savuca, Lucio Alves, Dominguinhos, Luiz Gonzaga, and many others. Sometime later, the king of Baião even visited them at the Bertussi farm in Malata. Master Gonzagao left, written in his own hand on one of the walls of the farm's galpão while they grilled meat, the following dedication. On September 23rd, 64, the king of Baião and king of Brazilian sympathy, Luiz Gonzaga, sang in this galpão. To the Bertussi brothers, my gratitude. Luiz Gonzaga, old tough guy. On July 21st, 1955, the brothers signed a contract with Copacabana Records and recorded their first album, Coração Gaucho. In just one day, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., they recorded 9 songs, all bearing their names. The entire career of the Bertussi brothers was crowned with glory. However, on March 26, 1966, by mutual decision, each went his own way, after performing in Caxias do Sul during the famous Grape Festival. Even so, their records continue to be played, sought after, and disputed by many. Their songs continue to be played and re-recorded by renowned musicians, always achieving great success around the world. Adelar Bertussi, unable to suppress within himself the destiny given to him by God, that of an accordionist, first formed a duo with his cousin Itagiba Matana, Os Cobras dos Teclados, and later, always with great success, formed the groups Os Reis do Fandango and Coração Gaucho, carrying forward his journey. In recent years, together with his son Gilney Bertussi, his musical heir, he formed the group Os Bertussi. Continuing firmly on his path, in his rural work and steady trotting, Adelar Bertussi is, as far as is known, the only living statue with the strength of a living being. The statue weighs over 300 kilos, made of bronze, and stands more than 3 meters tall. The statue of Adelar Bertussi stands beside that of his beloved and departed brother Honeide Bertussi, both proudly positioned atop the Serra, more precisely on a hill facing the Bertussi farm in São Jorge de Malata. At their feet, as a simple, solemn, and eternal tribute, the following message is engraved: the Gaucho homeland, to the Bertussi brothers. At the Malata farm, Adelar Bertussi now spends most of his time. When his schedule is free, when he is neither performing nor tending to the cattle, the drover of Gaucho music welcomes all his fans, friends, and neighbors with open arms. His greatest joy is receiving visitors who come to see the farm and the monument of the Bertussi brothers. He spends hours sharing chimarrão and conversation with guests, while from time to time, to everyone's delight, he opens the bellows of his old, worn accordion, which by now has played more than 5,000 dances in the most diverse places known throughout this gaucho world. Never reluctant, Adelar Bertussi often breaks into some of his most famous songs, sung by him and by all those present. Adelar takes great pleasure in welcoming all visitors and receives everyone with the utmost affection and attention, regardless of social position, color, race, or belief. Sharing his joy and good living with all, the living legend of the Pagos and the drover of gaucho music continues performing throughout the world. He keeps singing his most beautiful, consecrated songs, which since the beginning of his career have moved and continue to be sung and to inspire everyone, from the youngest accordionist to the most renowned. The accordionist, the singer, the legend, and the drover continues to sing and enchant, from the youngest children to the elders, especially delighting the many grandfathers and grandmothers, even those over 100 years old, spread throughout this God-blessed gaucho world. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Some short stories that took part in contests throughout Brazil. The case of the Gremista Colorado. Nicodemus had already been waiting for more than 45 minutes in the waiting room of Dr. Abelardano, his ophthalmologist, whom he always sought out whenever he needed help in cases of necessity and urgency. This was just one more of the many times he had gone to see him. His glasses, already very worn by time and use, with glass lenses that were also badly scratched, made it impossible for him to clearly see everything that was going on around him. The time had come, and after much reluctance, he had decided to open his hand and pay for the consultation. And there he was, in the doctor's office waiting room, to have his eyesight checked again and to get a prescription to have new glasses made. Although he was quite annoyed by the delay of his appointment with Dr. Abelardano, he was also happy and his heart was pounding, because the main reason that led him to have new glasses made was the upcoming match at Barrio. Even though it was not his team's stadium, his team was Grêmio. It would be the place where the two greatest rival teams of Porto Alegre would face each other, Grêmio and Inter. He would even have left the matter of the glasses for another day, but his nearsightedness was so severe that he could not tell a rat from an elephant if one of them passed in front of him. And for nothing in this world would he miss the chance to see that match, because it was the first opportunity he had to watch a soccer game live, directly from the stadium, in front of his team of the heart. A beautiful clash between those two fierce teams. During his long wait, sitting there lost in his thoughts, he remembered his inseparable friend Antunes, who was a great friend, his best friend. But despite being such a good friend and despite having grown up together, attended the same school, and shared countless experiences, Nicodemus thought that this friend, Antunes, had a huge flaw. For him, the biggest in the world, Antunes was a Colorado fan. Antunes was his greatest partner at all times, especially on weekends. When Saturdays came and night had barely fallen, Antunes was already at his house, or else Nicodemus would be at Antunes's place. Even when there was a grenal match, the two never separated, and there was always that teasing whenever one team or the other lost. Sometimes, when the jokes got heated, the two of them, along with their families, who were always together, would cool their heads with a few beers, leaving everything else aside and never losing their sportsmanship. At that moment, Isayu pulled Nicodemus out of his meditation. It was Dr. Abelardano's secretary calling him in for his appointment. Dr. Abelardano greeted him with his usual smile, which was quite characteristic of him, and after a few routine exams, he ended up giving him the prescription so he could order and have his new glasses made. Crazy with happiness, Nicodemus headed home, and as soon as he arrived, before anything else, he grabbed the phone and quickly called his friend Antunes. He told him the good news and said that now things would be different because on game day, at the grenal, he would be wearing new glasses. There would be two debuts. One, his first time going to Barrio Stadium, Antunes' team's field, to watch his team of the heart, Gremio, play up close, and the other, the debut of his new glasses, with which he would not miss a single detail of that important match. Antunes, as expected, teasingly told him that he would regret having new glasses made and that he should instead go with the old ones. With the lenses as scratched as they were, that would spare him from seeing the images of Gremio's goals conceded and defeat. Moreover, if he insisted on going with the new glasses, he would suffer a great loss, because the goals would be so many and the defeat so big that, already at the first goal scored by Inter, the lenses would crack. And saying this quickly, without giving his friend Nicodemus time to reply, and bursting into loud laughter, Antunes hung up the phone. Nicodemus already knew his friend Antunes well and knew that anything could be expected from him. It did not take long, and as usual, he had already forgotten the teasing and forgiven his friend. Things between the two were always more or less like that, and that was why no grudges ever remained. Time seemed not to pass, but finally the long-awaited Sunday arrived. The day of the great clash, the great match, the day of the grenel. Nicodemus, even more than Antunes, could hardly contain himself with so much joy. He would go for the first time to Barrio to see his team play live, and on top of that, wearing the new glasses he was already using. That Sunday morning, the two got up earlier than usual, and very early on, before the customary Sunday barbecue, they were already having a cold beer, one of the many that had been chilling in the refrigerator all week. Needless to say that by lunchtime, when the barbecue, quite delayed, finally made it to the table, and they rushed to eat because they were starting to worry about arriving late at the stadium, both of them were already fired up, way past Baghdad. They barely ate, just shoved the meat down their throats, and ran off toward the bus stop, already hoping that the bus would not be late or completely full. They finally managed to get to the stadium, but as first-time sailors, they had not expected that enormous crowd packed together, pushing and shoving, piling up, everyone wanting to get in at the same time, afraid that there would not be room for everyone. After the first shock, and not wanting for anything in the world to stay outside and miss the grenel, the two began to squeeze their way through the middle of the great mass. Although they were being tightly pressed and shoved by the people around them, they quickly learned how things worked and started to push back more and more, opening space and shoving those around them, hoping to make it inside the stadium. After so much pushing and shoving, taking a few elbows, and already being a bit high off the ground due to the amount of beer they had consumed, they began to force their way through even more, discreetly handing out little shoves to those around them. Looking at each other and finding the whole thing very funny, they burst into loud laughter. It did not take long before a group of somewhat hot-headed fans, noticing that kind of joking, did not find it funny at all. They made a move, leaving the two in the middle, and began to squeeze them, pressing them so much that both felt they might be lifted upward or pushed downward, due to the great crushing pressure they were being subjected to. By that point, Antunes had already lost his little fan flag and the Inter cap he had been wearing. Poor Nicodemus, when Antunes managed to turn toward him, noticed that he was no longer wearing his new glasses, looking more like a squashed duck in the middle of that mob and not knowing which way to go anymore, because without those glasses he could not see anything, nor could he tell where his friend Antunes was. Half out of breath due to the great pressure, Nicodemus shouted for his friend Antunes, but because of the enormous noise, Antunes only noticed Nicodemus's mouth opening and closing without being able to hear his voice. Still, knowing his friend well, he knew that Nicodemus could see nothing and was certainly calling out to him. And amid all that pushing and shoving, finally, after a long time, the friends found themselves inside the stadium. Once reunited inside, Antunes suggested to Nicodemus that as soon as the game started and the rush subsided, they would leave and he would take him back home, since Nicodemus would not be able to see anything without his glasses. But Nicodemus dug in his heels and said there was no way that after waiting so long for that day and having paid for the ticket, he would go home and miss the game. On top of that, using a strong argument and playing the poor guy, he managed to convince Antunes to stay with him in the stands where the Grêmio supporters were. Say, a friend who is a friend doesn't leave a friend hanging. Antunes tried to dodge it, but there was no way out. He was forced to agree with Nicodemus. But Antunes, in the meantime, had an idea and did the following. Since it was Nicodemus who could not see, instead of heading with his friend toward the side where the Grêmio supporters were gathered, he took Nicodemus by the hand and led him to the side where his own supporters were, the Colorados. The game began, and Nicodemus also began poking his friend Antunes, asking how the match was going, who was playing better, this and that. At that point in the game, Antunes, seeing that he would not be able to watch in peace because of Nicodemus's poking, leaned close to his ear and, in a conspiratorial tone, with a mischievous smile on his lips, said, "Since I'm your friend, today I'm going to cheer for your team, and every time I shout, it's because things are going well for your team." There is no need to comment on Nicodemus's joy, because from that moment on, every time Inter had a chance to score, Antunes jumped up and shouted like a madman. Nicodemus, thinking it was Grêmio attacking, also jumped up and, like a madman himself, whistled and shouted, making a duet with his friend. Inter scored the first goal, the second, and the third, and Antunes could hardly contain his joy, while Nicodemus was even happier, for he imagined it was his team, Grêmio, delivering a 3-0 thrashing. He was happier still at the thought that the friend beside him was cheering for his team. When the game ended, Nicodemus, believing that his team had won the match, did not let it go. He insisted and convinced his friend Antunes to go to the bar on the corner to have a round of beers to celebrate Grêmio's supposed victory. Antunes had no way to avoid it and thought to himself, "Tomorrow he'll find out everything, but today is today. Let's sink ourselves in these beers." Only in the early hours of the morning did the friends return home, arms around each other. Antunes, despite the trick he had played on his friend and already quite tipsy, felt calm. Nicodemus, however, knowing that at home he had one of the most jealous women the world had ever seen, who was certainly waiting for him awake at that hour, felt a slight bitterness in his mouth as he approached home and thought of his wife. But deep down he convinced himself, it's just the bitterness of the beer, and today is a day to celebrate, a day of joy. Reaching the corner, Antunes, being cautious, excused himself, saying it was already very late, and that from there he would return to his own house. Nicodemus, in the state he was in and carried away by the euphoria of his team's supposed victory, wanted at all costs to drag Antunes to his house for a final drink. Only after realizing that his friend truly would not go did Nicodemus, with a long hug and many thanks, and already wobbling on his legs, head home. Antunes, slipping away, stayed hidden in the shadows at the corner, waiting for his friend to enter the house. Nicodemus, loose on his feet, and forgetting how late it was already shouting for his wife from afar and began pounding on the door, more as if trying to knock it down. Nicodemus's wife, with her face set tight, jealous as only she could be, seeing her husband in that state of joy and drunkenness, did not think twice. She imagined that instead of having gone to the game, he must have been out getting into trouble with some woman. No sooner had Nicodemus set foot inside the house than she began questioning him. "Are these ours? Where have you been until this time of night? Did you forget you have a wife and children? And your commitments tomorrow morning?" Nicodemus paused and, with a look of pure innocence, replied, "I went to the game, just as we had agreed." She then ventured a question he could never answer wrong. "And how was the game?" Thinking that everything was now settled, Nicodemus broke into a grin from ear to ear, ran to her and hugged her, saying, "We won 3-0. She, as if struck by lightning, asked again, and he again, almost drooling, replied, "We won 3-0. From the corner where he was hiding, Antunes saw, all of a sudden, the door of Nicodemus's house fly open. Against the light pouring out, he saw pots, plates, and basins flying through the air. Then he saw the silhouette of Nicodemus, who shot out the door like a lightning bolt, while behind him his wife, broom in hand, and looking like a witch, chased him, raining blows and tenderizing his back. It is said that much later the two were seen together again on other occasions. But the friendship was never the same, and it is whispered that Nicodemus, after that day, whenever he goes out with Antunes, always carries more than one spare pair of glasses hidden on him, just in case. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. The Tale of the Skittish Horse.
Street Place, Estância da Poesia Crioula Contest, Porto Alegre, 5 de fevereiro de 2024.
Around the year 1922, in the surroundings of Craiova, when the first houses began to appear there, and around that same time when the farm buildings of the Bertussi estate were built by the patriarch Fioravant Bertussi, a man well known throughout those lands. On one of his many rides to more populated localities, he was entrusted, at the request of a local farmer, with bringing an image of a saint, since until then there had been no such image in that remote place. Among the saintly images found in the city, Fioravant decided to take to his settlement that of the warrior Saint George, a saint he greatly admired, respected, and venerated since his boyhood. In those parts it was customary for drovers, on their journeys with their herds, sometimes more than 1,500 mules, to pass through there at night, or, when they had a little less time, at least to stop for a midday rest. They would take advantage of the stop to negotiate some animals with a local merchant, one Alfredo Horn, well known for having a large and prosperous mule breeding business. Because many mule herds passed through there, mules being a widely used means of transport in those days, combined with Alfredo Horn's mule breeding, people in general began to call the place Malata because of the image of the saint, St. George of Malata, a name by which it became known to all and remains so to this day. And it was also there in Malata, on one of those stormy nights, that, as was customary among drovers on rainy nights, or on very cold ones with frost, or when the minuano wind whistled through the cracks in the walls more strongly than usual. Upon sighting a farmhouse, the drovers would promptly head toward it. One of them, as was the practice at the time to announce their arrival, would begin shouting from afar, "Hello, anyone home?" Soon after, from the owner or one of the hired hands, a reply would be heard. "Come into the shed, friend. Come warm yourself by the fire, have a swig of cane liquor, a hot mate, and chat a bit with these friendly hands, the folks of this place." By chance or not, that night they were all gathered in the shed of the Bertussi farm, where, as always, they were welcomed with the good and traditional hospitality of old Fioravant Bertussi, who in little time made all the newcomers feel as if they were in their own homes. And between one drink and another, the carving of the barbecue, with fat dripping onto the embers of the ground fire, the gourd from which the mate was served passed from hand to hand, while the weeping sound of a well-worn, grease-polished accordion played by a hired hand could be heard. Mixed in were murmurs, chatter, shouts, and the usual shed bravado, which, because the hands were full of liquor and good food, were hard to understand, but which from time to time fell silent when a more serious conversation arose or when a storyteller caught everyone's attention. Then the uproar stopped at once, and all listened intently. From early on the weather turned rainy, and across the sky flashed the bright glare of a lightning bolt followed by the crash of thunder, marking the beginning of a heavy downpour, with thick drops that sounded almost like hailstones as they struck the zinc roof of the shed. And so it was, as one thing pulls another, a saying from the backcountry, that with the rain and the thunderclaps came a brief moment of silence. Then, taking advantage of the bad weather as a theme, from a dark corner of the shed, where a ranch hand sat perched on a soap crate, covered by a worn-out sheepskin, one began to hear from his mouth, he being the oldest man on the ranch and known by the nickname Agapito, a tale related to rainy weather and the flooding of the Antaz River, which not many leagues away wound its way through the lands of the ranch. He began telling a story about how, long ago, there lived there an old black man, the son of a slave, whom everyone called Manalena. The man was always a man of few words, speaking only when asked, and he worked right there for a ranch owner who had bought a large estate in the surroundings of Malata, much of whose land was watered by the waters of the Antaz River. As was known to all the locals, when the rains lasted a long time in those parts, the river swelled with water and its banks advanced several fathoms on both sides. The waters, once clean, clear, and crystalline, became muddy and turbid on such occasions, leaving the enormous quantity of fish in its bed completely disoriented, causing them to come up against the banks and thus become easy prey for those who had the habit of torch fishing or otherwise catching them. For more than a week the rains gave no respite and fell heavily, making even Manalena have difficulty reaching the far pastures of his employer's ranch to check on the livestock, where, among the many animals roaming freely, there was also his cherished bay horse, which he had raised since it was young and which he himself had named Pescasso. But finding no other way, between one brief lull and another, he ventured out, and putting on his cloak and hat, set off toward the back of the ranch. After walking for a long time along a shortcut that crossed the marshland and made passage quite difficult, since it was swollen from the rain, he finally reached the slope of the Antaz River, which had advanced far up the bank. From there he could see that all the cattle, despite the downpour, were well, and nearby he spotted his beloved horse grazing. Pescaso, upon seeing his familiar owner, immediately raised his head, gave a whinny, and trotted toward him. But he stopped a few meters away from Main Elena and began to shake his head in strange ways never before seen by his owner. Pescaso began to whinny again and, while shaking his head from side to side, seemed to point toward the river waters, as if wanting him to go to the bank, calling his attention to something over there. So many were Pescaso's whinnies and head tosses that Main Elena slowly made his way toward the river. And there, not even fully arriving, still from a short distance away, he was greatly surprised. Very near the bank, spread across the ground over the green grass, on all sides there lay an enormous quantity of fish, some of which were still alive due to the torrential rain that continued to fall. Astonished by the unexpected scene, Main Elena stood still for a few seconds, staring at all those fish scattered on the ground. Only after some time did he come to his senses and remember to look around for the fisherman responsible for such a feat, but he noticed no sign of anyone there. So, determined, he decided to search along the banks to see if he might find a long line, a fish trap, or even a basket. He first walked a good distance upstream and later returned searching downstream. Finding nothing, Main Elena went back to where the fish lay scattered on the grass, and, since there were so many, he decided to throw back into the river those still alive. The rest, which remained, he gathered by breaking a branch from a nearby shrub and making a bundle. Even so, before returning to the ranch, he cast one more look in all directions to see whether the fisherman had appeared. But nothing at all. Only his horse remained nearby, with a demeanor he had never noticed before, as if only the animal knew the story behind that mysterious fishing. Intrigued and far more curious to unravel the mystery than to check the livestock, he returned early the next day and, before doing anything else, went straight to the spot where he had found the fish. He passed by his horse Pescaso, who, upon seeing him, raised his head and stood firmly where he was, as if waiting for his owner to reach the riverbank. Old Main Elena almost fell backward when he again saw spread across the ground roughly the same quantity of fish as the day before. And once again, after searching all around the river's edge and finding no trace of the mysterious fisherman, he released the fish still alive and prepared another bundle with those remaining, returning, as on the previous day, to his quarters on the ranch. But by the fourth day, seeing the same story repeat itself, he made a decision. Even with the rain still battering the whole countryside, he decided to stay hidden by the river all night long and finally discover who the great fisherman was who caught so many fish and left so many scattered across the pasture. As night fell, just as darkness began to settle, Main Elena was already hidden among the foliage, waiting. He could barely contain his anxiety, and by then it was already past midnight, with no one appearing. He began to feel great fear that he might be dealing with a wandering soul from the other world, which did not please him at all. He pushed away the sinister thought, imagining that at any moment the great fisherman would appear. And there he remained, eyes wider than ever. Time seemed slow to pass. Wrapped in his cloak, while the rain poured down upon his precarious shelter, suddenly, half dozing, Main Elena heard the sound of footsteps approaching and shrank further back. This time he would learn who the mysterious fisherman was, who secretly came every night to fish there. But it did not take long for disappointment to dash his hopes. The moment of meeting the fisherman would not come then, for who was arriving at the bank of the Antaz River was none other than his horse, Pescaso, slowly walking as if very thirsty, though noticeably hesitant and unsure about approaching the river. Finally, after much hesitation, Pescaso put his muzzle in the water, but quickly pulled it back out. And it was then that Main Elena's incredulous eyes nearly popped from their sockets. Every time the horse touched his muzzle to the river to drink, he immediately pulled it away, as if receiving an electric shock. What happened was that a great number of fish, in a huge bubbling swirl, and sometimes even jumping above the water, disoriented and dazed by the muddy waters of the Antaz River, mistook Pescaso's thick whiskers for food or insects and latched onto them. Pescaso, tossing his head backward to rid himself of what clung to his whiskers, ended up flinging the fish a good distance away, where they landed up on the slope, scattered across the green grass. Again and again the horse tried to drink, and again the same thing happened, until, once he had barely quenched his thirst, behind him on the riverbank there was already a good quantity of fish, caught by Pescaso, hopping about. The feet of the horse Pescaso spread throughout the region, and although no one but old Main Elena had witnessed the fishing, before long people came from every corner, bringing their mares to breed with Main Elena's stallion, and gladly he welcomed them all with hospitality. When Agapito, the teller of the tale, was finishing his story, one of the muleteers, very suspicious and having never heard of such an event, questioned him. "And that bay horse? Does he still trot around these parts to prove your story is true, Chi?" To which the other replied, "No, the good old horse Pescaso has been gone for quite some time now." And again the muleteer asked, "If that horse Pescaso no longer exists, who can guarantee this isn't just another tall tale?" Then old Agapito, with the patience of his age, calmly rolling his hand-rolled cigarette, answered while finishing his account, "It's true, Pescaso no longer exists, but he left behind many pregnant mares, and right here in São Jorge de Mulata, just half a block away, in this very paddock, among many horses and a few donkeys, there is another stallion with the same coat, named Picasso, grandson of the late Pescaso, who guarantees it, and who would never let me stand here inventing such a story all by myself. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. The number one fan. It's of a song I heard some time ago, which stayed at the top of the charts for quite a while, says, "It's not your father who doesn't understand you. It's you who don't understand your father." I immediately thought of a young man I have known for a long time, and with whom daily coexistence turned us into friends, true friends, indeed. Our nights out are very rare, due to our work and because of our wives and children. In those rare meetings, however, we spend the nights exchanging ideas, talking about our dreams, our future, in short, philosophizing and composing themes about daily life, and about everything and everyone who lives life in the lands of this gaucho Brazil. In that young man, incidentally, the mold of the gaucho and his ideals of struggle and culture has always been reflected. Like every young man his age, he too had, and still has, an idol. Since childhood, in fact, he has remained faithful to that idol. Trends could come and go, an idol could disappear from the charts, and a new fashion could arise out of nowhere. In any case, to this day, that fan remains faithful to his idol, to his favorite singer and musician. I learned from him, and also through his admirable idol, that he had decided to follow the successful footsteps of the one who had so deeply stirred his feelings, his life, and influenced his customs. In short, this young man decided to devote the one life God gave him to doing what his idol was doing, and continues to do to this day. I must note that even before knowing him, I already counted myself among the admirers and fans of the artist he so greatly admires. When someone told me they were his greatest fan, I would think to myself, you may be a great fan, but a greater admirer and fan than I certainly you are not. Over time, however, I had to do what the old saying goes, give in. I ended up meeting someone who is an unconditional admirer, fan, and ardent friend of our idol, to whom he devotes so much love and also excels in the same musical art. To someone arriving suddenly and knowing little about this young man's life, he would appear to be just another youth walking the same road so many of his age, and even older, have ventured upon. In the past, I myself saw him as just one among many striving for their ideals. But by listening more closely and observing his music over the years, I found a tireless warrior, one who had already been born with the instinct and the gift for his art. It was no coincidence that he chose to follow the path paved by the one who so greatly influenced him. At a very young age, with uncommon talent, the young man managed to be noticed by his idol. Thus, like in a fairy tale, he began to play and sing with his number one idol. From the very first opportunity, the young man would never part from his beloved idol, remaining by his side and forming with him a partnership of fine stock, playing for more than 2 decades with the group they formed. In 2013, during farrapos week, as was customary at that time of year, the young talent's schedule was completely full. His presence at dances and shows across the vast expanse of the Brazilian countryside became the most requested of all. It was then that I decided to put on paper some of what I witnessed, observing the young man's actions more closely. His overcrowded agenda listed 10 performances over the next 10 days. 10 shows and dances spread across different parts of the country, some requiring him to travel more than 1,000 kilometers to honor his commitments. The rush was overwhelming for this renowned musician, but with his energy, refined love for his work, and a smile stamped on his face, he gave his very best. According to the media, his group ranked among the 5 most played and among the best performing on radio and television. But what led me to accept that I could neither be nor had the right to be the number one fan of our idol, setting aside past events, was witnessing a remarkable scene during farrapos week. My friend had to face 10 days packed with major commitments, 10 days with practically no rest, barely able to sleep. Even so, despite being between 500 and over 1,000 kilometers away from where he was scheduled to perform, he made time to accept the invitation of his greatest idol and accompany him at his shows, on dates when his own schedule was equally packed. In all his performances during that hectic farrapos week, gilney bertussi, always by the side of his idol and father, Adelar bertussi, once again showed and proved his strength, his great character as a man, as a human being, as an accordion player, singer, composer, and poet. He unmistakably displayed his gaucho grit, giving and offering much more of himself than expecting or asking for anything in return. On that occasion, for me and for so many who closely follow the trajectory of this great artist, it was once again made evident the immense love Gilney, as son and admirer, dedicates to his idol and father, Adelar Bertussi, who is world-renowned as the tropero of gaucho music and the living legend of Rio Grande. Gilney Bertussi, after fulfilling commitments with his group and performing with his father, being the loving, good, and exemplary son he has always been, would leave the stage with his accordion still on his back, put his arm around his beloved father's shoulder and neck, and accompany him. He would take him to his vehicle, parked not far away, and then personally drive him back to his farm. I must confess that in the love this son showed for his father, and in that fan's admiration for his idol, I realized someone had surpassed me, both in affection and love, as well as in admiration. His acts of love and generosity were gratuitous. He asked nothing in return. He did them without seeking payment or attention. For him, a simple smile and a look of approval were enough. Later, just a thank you from his father was reward enough, the greatest payment and the only return he ever sought or received. There he was beside his beloved father in silent devotion, wanting to express how deeply he loved him and how everything he did was to demonstrate his admiration and love. Feelings that words could perhaps never fully convey, as a son, as well as his successor and heir. The feelings Gilney Bertussi holds for his father place him in the category of number one fan. Undeniably. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. The good days of yesteryear. It was on a beautiful afternoon, after this had happened to me hundreds of times, that a persistent and nostalgic inner longing once again nudged me. Because of this, I firmly made a decision regarding what had been pursuing me for a long time. Resolved and willing to take a rest, I took paper and pencil and went beneath the leafy, centuries-old fig tree not far from my home. There, in the tranquility of such an idyllic place, I felt it was the ideal spot to put into practice my old and long-desired objective. Not far from the fig tree, I noticed a rustic stone, and with some difficulty, due to its great weight, I slowly managed to drag it close to the trunk. I adjusted it so it would rest firmly on the ground, and only then sat down, letting my body lean back and making the fig tree trunk my comfortable backrest. Then, somewhat without initiative and not knowing where to begin, I was unsure what exactly to write. I only knew that one day my small children would learn about our family, at least part of the history my father used to tell. The children were still too young to be interested in such matters, and even when I tried many times to speak about my father, they paid little attention to my words. As soon as I started talking, one would wander off to one side, another to the other, and in the end they would all leave me talking to the walls. So I made this decision, to leave written for them part of the history and the good advice of my father. I then began, though with some difficulty, using one hand to support the paper while the other scribbled fragments of what remained in my memory, such as my father's teachings and sentiments. Thus absorbed in my recollections, it felt as though he were right there in front of me, telling me about his ideas, his longings, his past, and especially about his cherished childhood days. With emphasis, he narrated as if returning to the past, his gaze lost in time, recalling the most beautiful memories and the best of yesteryear. He remembered his united family, the place where he was born, and his beloved land. With moist eyes, he spoke fondly of his old friends and nostalgically recounted his older, dearly loved brothers, whose good examples he tried to follow. Neighbors and those far away were also remembered, along with those who had passed on and many others I can no longer recall. In his narrative, my father saw himself running freely and fearlessly across the fields, innocent and unburdened. There he felt free, closely followed by his greatest and inseparable partner, his younger brother, Doy. In those moments, sensing the strong longing that pained him and stole his freedom, I felt his words carrying him far from reality, back to his past, his youth, and his boyhood days. His only comfort was remembering, and as I sat there listening, I confess that his nostalgia hurt me deeply as well. As his son and friend, I remained quietly by his side and saw how he wished, in his childlike dreaming, to return to his past in one way or another. He said he would give anything to return in time, even if only for a moment, to soothe his longing and be a child again. He murmured to himself about where the old, trustworthy friends he had left behind might be, those he had never seen again. They had grown up together in his beloved village of Rio do Pauso, but time had taken it upon itself to separate them. What had become of the purest dreams that had once been shelved, yet still pulsed within him? And the loves from his school days, where had they all gone? Only memories remained. With his lament and the past demanding answers, he remembered everything left behind. He complained of what he had not done, of what he failed to do, of the present he once dreamed of in childhood, and of everything he had not known how to value. He also regretted distancing himself from what he loved most, and setting aside the best of the most beautiful age, when happiness was shared among all. Out of innocence, however, he failed to value it, unaware that all this and much more had been within his reach. He still held in memory the cold winter mornings when he left early for school. The circle games, tag, and hide and seek came to mind, as did the endless classes. He remembered notes passed to his little sweetheart and his lovely teacher teaching the lesson. He said all these were good memories, forever engraved on the left side of his chest. In a murmur, he wondered where the old stream was where every afternoon he set his fish trap. He asked about the fence by the pasture and the marica thorn bush, a place of great commotion filled with birds. He spoke of doves returning to their nests, built in thorn fences woven with marica, carrying food in their beaks to their chicks. Nearby, he spent long hours sitting and observing every detail. And the bird trap set on the hillside thicket, and the cage with its trigger armed? He recalled how his little finch would hop about, always ready. In these simple scribbles, I now feel the same longing he felt for his best years, when he bitterly said that people today have little connection with the customs of the past. I too believe that most people today care little for their childhood days, though I think some, few though they may be, still remember what lies far behind. When I meet one or two of my few friends, I find some comfort talking about the past, warmed by a little drink and memories of good times. In those moments, we feel like boys again. Through this scribbling, unable to hold it in any longer, I try to share a bit of what I loved so dearly and speak of who I once was. I know these lines may seem to many like mere stories, but everything will remain written and recorded. Whether it is true or not, only a few, in their remembering, will say. But I know and am certain that I am not speaking only to the walls, for much of what my father once lived was also lived by others. And today they too feel longing for the good moments past, for the radiant dawn. And like me now, they would give everything, and more, for the good days of yesteryear. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. The mystery of the Colorado anthem. Juvenile, back in the days when soccer was beginning to spread throughout Rio Grande do Sul, when no one yet knew about the so-called virus that causes the football disease, unknowingly already carried within him that novelty which today is so deeply ingrained in the hearts of fans. Juvenile was a married man, and very well married, by the way, even though his wife was a beautiful prenda from an excellent family. He secretly carried an immeasurable sorrow. The problem was that his wife, his in-laws, and the rest of the family were supporters of Sport Club Internacional, and this, in his sickly gremio supporting mind, he could never come to terms with. Juvenile would stew inside over this and other facts about the Colorados, especially when they won a match. And although the entire neighborhood knew of his football fanaticism for his club, he did everything possible not to show it and tried to disguise his illness. Juvenile had been married for about 2.5 years when his first child was born, who was, in fact, a beautiful baby girl. Overjoyed with life, the baby had barely been born when he ran off to invite one of the neighbors to be her godfather. The chosen godfather, for reasons not even his own family could understand, was not one of the closest neighbors and, to make matters worse, was a passionate supporter of his team's greatest rival. He was invited, and as if that weren't enough, he was a fanatical Colorado supporter. Sometime later, a similar case occurred again. His wife once more gave birth, but this time it was a boy. As before, the father again set aside the closest neighbors and even some friends who supported his own team, Gremio. And so it was that he invited yet another Colorado supporter to be godfather, someone who lived even farther away than the first. Juvenile had his reasons for inviting rival supporters to be godfathers to his children, and to increase the astonishment, new surprises took place on the days of the baptisms. It so happened that only at each child's celebration did the godfathers, still poorly informed, learn the children's names. The shock for the Colorado godfathers was so great that both of them nearly fell backwards. The godfather of the girl was quite startled, for it was only at the baptism that he realized the extent of the child's father's fanaticism. Juvenile, on his own initiative, decided to baptize the girl with a very strange name, Grimilda. Because of his fanaticism, the name sounded like a jab to the godfather and was, at the same time, a tribute to the child's father's team. The case of the boy's name was no different. The new godfather was also surprised upon hearing the child's name, no less strange than the first, Olimpio. It was another jab at the new compadre and, of course, a tribute to Gremio's stadium, the Olimpico Monumental. Even during the baptisms and festivities, the godfathers could not help noticing something quite curious. Whenever they looked at Juvenile's face, being the sickly Gremio supporter that he was, they saw stamped upon it an undisguised smile, as if he were having a good laugh. Everything seemed like a form of revenge against the godfathers, since neither supported Gremio, and both were fanatical Internacional supporters, the most fierce and historic rival of Gremio. Never had there been talk of a fan as fanatical as Juvenal. He was the kind of supporter who, after Internacional's matches, would be either extremely happy or deeply upset. And everyone already knew that when he was joyful and elated, it was because his rival team had lost the match. And when he was found upset, sad, and dejected, it was because Inter had won a game. Juvenal's joys and sorrows no longer came from whether Grêmio won or lost its matches, but clearly and almost exclusively from the results of the opposing team. For all intents and purposes, this is the truth. Juvenal could no longer stand hearing the Colorado supporters cheering and celebrating the victories of their beloved team. Regarding his behavior, a comment about a strange and even amusing story of his circulated freely. In front of his house, a neighbor of his, a Colorado supporter, used to play, because he greatly enjoyed Internacional's anthem, the record on his turntable almost every day. This nearly drove Juvenal mad, completely beside himself. In his fanatical supporter's mind, the music the neighbor listened to was pure provocation, something done solely to needle him. One day, finding a way while the neighbor was not at home, he furtively went into the fellow's house and managed to steal the record that bothered him so much. Later, the neighbor returned home, and as soon as he noticed the disappearance of his special record, his beloved musical treasure, he nearly went crazy. He searched every room of the house, room by room, but found nothing. Rumor had it that he even cast a glance toward Juvenal's house, going so far as to entertain some foolish thoughts about the situation. Soon after, however, he tried to dismiss it all from his mind and forget what troubled him. After searching the entire house and surroundings without success, the Colorado neighbor decided to go to the nearest shop to buy another record. At that time, however, there were few stores in his town, and all were quite far from where he lived. Even so, he returned home happy as could be, and even more frequently in the days that followed. Internacional's anthem could be heard echoing throughout the neighborhood. As the sound reached Juvenal's house and ears, from that moment on he had no doubt that the neighbor was provoking him. This time, he made a drastic decision. He went to the room where he kept all his savings, inside a clay piggy bank, and after futile attempts to remove the money through the slot, while still hearing from outside the sound of Internacional's anthem, Juvenal, losing the little calm he had left, smashed the piggy bank against the floor. Then, among the clay fragments, he began to gather all his savings into a small pile. After collecting all the money and placing it in a discreet folder, the Grêmio supporter walked out the door without explaining anything, not even to his own wife. He slammed the door behind him and went straight to the bus stop, where he waited a few minutes. Once arriving at his destination, Juvenal headed to the same record shop where his neighbor had purchased the Colorado anthem vinyl. There, after much negotiation with the owner, they finally reached an agreement. Juvenal would buy the entire stock of vinyl records with the Colorado anthem, paying a slightly higher price for each as compensation. At the same time, the shopkeeper committed himself never again to resell copies of that record. Extremely happy, with a victorious smile on his lips, Juvenal returned home. There, he discreetly went to the back of the yard, near a thicket, grabbed a sturdy shovel, dug a deep hole, and buried all the records he had purchased. Having done so, he felt much more relieved, though he admitted that his mission was not yet entirely complete. He still had to find a way to make the neighbor's record, the one played daily on the turntable and which tormented him so much, disappear. So, lying in wait, Juvenal anxiously waited for days on end for an opportunity, certain that the neighbor would leave the house. If that happened, he could repeat his subtle and stealthy gesture from before and finally conclude his mission. After so much waiting in ambush near the neighbor's house, the opportunity naturally arose. One afternoon, when the Colorado neighbor had gone out, Juvenal entered his house and managed to bring out the LP with the famous Internacional anthem. After abducting the record, looking around, and seeing no one, the fanatical Gremio supporter went to the back of his own house and, instead of burying it, threw it over the thicket. The LP landed deep in the lot, on the branches of a dry tree surrounded by other trees. Thus, satisfied and completely happy with life, Juvenal returned to the comfort of his home. His torment was over forever, or so he thought. The Gremio supporter knew that the neighbor would no longer have in his hands, at least not anytime soon, another record with the Colorado anthem, which Juvenal seemed to fear even more than he hated. Time went by, and nothing more was heard of the Colorado anthem. One night, however, when it was already well past midnight, suddenly, in the distance, the anthem of Internacional began to be heard once again, though only its opening line could be made out. Glory of national sport. Oh, Internacional. Soon after, the sound stopped and everything fell silent. But after a short while, the song returned and once again the anthem could be heard, though only that small fragment kept repeating. Glory of national sport. Oh, Internacional. And so, throughout the night and into the early morning hours, the refrain continued to echo to the four winds, interspersed with pauses of silence. Morning came, and Juvenal had not managed to fall asleep, having slept almost nothing during the night. And worse still, he had been forced to listen to that repetitive part of the anthem of that team, as he would refer to Internacional whenever he spoke of it. On such occasions, he always became ill-humored and felt deeply upset. When he got up, already hearing the bustle of the city and the sound of people at work, Juvenal could no longer hear the fateful music and could not tell where it had come from. In the silence of the following night, however, once again he heard the inglorious excerpt of Internacional's anthem. Sometimes those words reached his ears more clearly. At other times, after a certain silence, the anthem could be heard louder, as if the sound, by some enchantment, were being carried by the winds. And that night, to his renewed torment, Juvenal could not sleep properly. In the morning, with the noise of the city and the movement of cars, the Gremio supporter could hear nothing. Yet, when night fell, especially if a breeze blew toward his home, that same inglorious refrain reached his ears. Again and again came that sound that tormented him every night and drove him out of his mind. Then, after many and many sleepless nights, Juvenal decided that he would locate the origin of the sound that bothered him so much. He would try to unravel that mystery and put an end to his suffering once and for all. Determined as he was, he grabbed a flashlight and left the house. In the yard, reaching the back of the property, he noticed that it was still difficult to pinpoint the source of the sound, especially since the gentle breeze confused him even more. However, calmly and fully resolved to uncover the mystery, the Gremio supporter felt that the music seemed to come from the rear. He might have to cross the thicket to get closer to the likely place from which the dreadful anthem emanated. Slowly and cautiously, Juvenal began to push his way into the brush, stopping only when the sound momentarily fell silent. When the refrain resumed, he continued forward. After walking for a long time in one direction, then another, already tired of hearing the refrain that tormented him, the gremio supporter finally found the place from which those intermittent words were coming. But nothing. Upon arriving there, the music once again fell silent, and before him there was nothing in the middle of the thicket to indicate that anything, or any living soul, was there playing the music. Suddenly, Juvenal felt a strong chill run through his body. Surely, he reasoned, there must be the ghost of a Colorado supporter there, the one tormenting and haunting him during his sleepless nights. At that moment, he felt the hairs on his head stand on end, but mustering a bit more courage, he crouched on the trunk of a dry tree and turned off the flashlight for a few moments. Camouflaged amid the night and the bushes, he remained alert and hopeful of identifying whoever might be there. Then a faint and gentle breeze began to blow again, and he, curling in a bit more to shield himself from the draft, pressed himself closer to the trunk. At that instant, a great fright. Out of nowhere, the refrain of the Colorado anthem sounded again, echoing in all directions and giving the impression that an orchestra hovered above his head. Then, quickly, fearful and thoroughly scared, Juvenal switched on his flashlight and aimed the beam upward, trying to locate the point from which the refrain that distressed him so much was coming. But all was in vain, and as he found no place left to cast the light of his flashlight, he became even more terrified by the mystery that surrounded him. Next, when the wind began to blow more strongly, the gremio supporter Juvenal heard a crack above his head, and a small dry branch fell beside him. As fast as he could, he focused the flashlight beam on the top of the tree just as the refrain was heard once more, breaking the silence of the woods. To his surprise, hardly believing what his eyes saw, Juvenal noticed that at the top of the dry tree, among sparse and twisted branches, something was being reflected by the light. Only after a good while did he manage to detect that, up in the treetop, there was a vinyl record, the very one he had stolen from his neighbor's house. He then remembered that it had been thrown over the thicket. As incredible and unusual as the scene appeared, the fact was that the central hole of the record had gotten caught on a small dry branch, and resting upon the vinyl was a very thin twig that served as a needle. In this way, whenever the breeze blew, the record would spin, and the thin twig would play only the opening refrain of the song. Glory of national sport. Oh, internacional. What a torment. Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. The Old Man and the Dog. 27 years ago, when I was still a clerk in a record store in Rio Grande do Sul, more precisely at the bus station in Torres, I witnessed something quite unusual and even somewhat amusing. An old man appeared in the shop, looking to be about 70 years old. In one hand he carried a cane, while in the other he held a pastel. Obviously, from time to time he brought the food to his mouth. However, relying only on the help of his two canines, which were the only teeth he still had left, he did so with great difficulty. Crushing the pastry more than biting it, the old man managed to tear off a piece at a time, which was then rolled around with his tongue and savored. Leaning on his cane, he strolled slowly and leisurely around the shop, He certainly did not have good eyesight, for he would stare at one object for a long time and then stop in front of another, once again remaining motionless for quite some time. Possibly he was there merely to pass the time, waiting to board some bus. Everything was going normally until a loud noise was heard. The sound of a blow delivered by the old man against a porcelain dog. The strike sent shards flying in all directions, while the old man, now more agile and quick, rushed out of the shop in fright. While everyone stood astonished by the blow, by the old man's dash, and by the sight of the shattered ceramic dog, the security guard appeared and immediately wanted to know what had led the old man to commit such an act. To which the old man replied, "I hit the thing because it was eyeing my pastel, wanting to eat it." Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. At the end of this book, a brief reflection on humankind and on how it finds itself along its path. Man goes back in time. Yes, man is going back in time. Even after hundreds of years of living in the era of evolution, he is regressing. It appears that, according to the system under which one lives, human beings are doomed to spend many more hundreds of years returning to the past. Is this the true path programmed for humankind? Someone might ask, has the time machine been invented? And the answer would be, it is believed not. Yet how is it that contemporary human beings are returning to live as their ancestors once lived? And to that I reply, in the most ancient times, man had not yet developed even 10% of his intellectual capacity. Today, however, with his intellectual development, the vulnerable human being is entering a new phase, that of a life like cattle. But then the question arises, a life like cattle? And since there must be an answer to every question mark, this gap must be filled, and proper considerations on the subject are therefore necessary. Modern man, without knowing it and without being aware of it, is acting as though he were an irrational animal. He behaves very much like a head of cattle, being nothing more than a number in the herd. Hence the comparison. In the morning, cattle leave the stable in search of pasture, while man does the same when he leaves for work. Basically, day after day, he is in search of food for himself and for his own. At night, cattle return to their stable, and man does so as well. That is, man returns to his precarious and humble home. And he returns tired, poorly fed, with his dreams of life reduced to zero. He does not even think of providing better food or better clothing for his family, nor does he reflect upon their health. There is no perspective, not even the dream of a better day, for this type of cattle. All that remains is the slaughterhouse, if he does not die of other ailments before being definitively cornered. Thus, in search of the scarce grass to continue surviving the following morning, off the cattle go once more across the pasture. Or rather, off goes man to his work, to which he proceeds without awareness of his place in the world and without knowing the reason for his passage through life. This time, I ask you, is man not going back in time? Is he or is he not living a life like cattle? Without being aware of his importance as a human being, another question arises. Is the human being prepared to be independent, to be the master of his own steps and of his destiny on the face of the earth? Here begins a new page of this book, the gaucho of Brazil and of the world. A little about this author. A Writer's Mind and a Poet's Soul by Gustavo Magnus Zanelato. He brings together in his trajectory 48 books published in Brazil and in several Portuguese-speaking countries. with others still in the final stages of completion. He has participated in countless literary contests, being awarded with several prizes, among which stand out the Estancia de Poja Criolla Award and first place in the contest FECI, Sport Club Internacional, on which occasion he received, from the City Council of Torres, more than once, an honorable motion of congratulations. For many years I have followed his work and his journey, not only as a writer and poet, but also as a painter, sculptor, and composer. Several of his songs and compositions have been, and continue to be, recorded both by established artists and by admirers who are enchanted by the sensitivity of his art. In his passage through the musical universe, driven by romanticism and by a tireless creative spirit, he recorded 4 CDs of remarkable cultural variety. In addition to being a fervent encourager of the arts, alongside me, he also ventured into new creative fronts, such as film production, an area in which we produced 2 highly relevant documentaries about Southern epics. I am here to tell you a little about Valmir Zanolato, about his art and his multiple talents as a writer, poet, composer, artisan, painter, sculptor, and singer, author and performer of the anthem Torres, Cidade Serena. A successful entrepreneur, he also distinguished himself in the fields of civil construction and commerce, areas in which, since his youth, he demonstrated vision, talent, and perseverance, firmly outlining the projects of each stage of his life. Up to the present, he has written countless books of poetry and prose, novels, documentaries, and other literary genres. He is the author of compositions and of innumerable song lyrics, many of them recorded by renowned singers, ensembles, and groups. He has participated in musical DVDs and studio recordings, performing his own works, some in partnership with other musicians, in addition to having released for solo albums. On the walls of his home, one can see diplomas, certificates, a musician's license, recording contracts, medals, and keepsakes that attest to a life dedicated to art. Among his paintings, some framed and hung in places of prominence, one perceives the glow of his hours of inspiration. Amid these treasured items, resting inside an old trunk, a reminiscence of his days as a hippie and artisan, there lies a colorful leather wallet made by his own hands. It is a relic from a time when he produced and sold his works in General Osorio Square, in Ipanema, Rio de Janeiro, and in Republica Square, Sao Paulo. There, among memories of youth, the flame of art and creative freedom remains alive. With these brief words, I wish to offer our wide circle of friends, near or far, a glimpse of the unique figure of this man, devoid of vanity, yet full of talent, and of an art so broad and diversified, something rare in our times. Thus, I record here my sincere gratitude and the privilege of being able to express, even if in only a few lines, my admiration for this very special artist.
Gustavo Magnus Zanellato.
Here begins a new page of this book, The Gaucho of Brazil and of the World. Title, The Gaucho of Brazil and of the World. Through this page, I send a fraternal embrace to all my esteemed friends who are engaged in daily labor throughout this Brazil of ours. Day after day, along our walk through life, everything we know and what we learn from everyone, especially when it comes to art, occurs through the influence of those whom we consider examples and elect as idols. And it is certainly due to this intense coexistence that I was influenced on my journey by these great people who are my idols and friends. Therefore, I could not fail to mention here some names that now come to mind, with no intention whatsoever of diminishing those not listed here.
Adelar bertussi, albino manique, mirins, gilney bertussi, grupos bertussi, manoel cassiano, honeide bertussi, ernesto nunes, valdeci santos, edison dutra, os serranos, iedo silva, os farrapos, berenice azambuja, gaúcho da fronteira, délcio tavares, Teixeirinha Filho, José Mendes Filho, Paulo Siqueira, Ivan Taborda, as Gauchinhas, Celso e Marine Siqueira, Renel, Barbosa Velho, Vilmar Sucela, Renato Borghetti, Paulo Siqueira Bertussi, Luiz Carlos Borges, Paixão, Cortês, Gildinho, os Monarcas, Eleonardo Cafi, Paulo Bertussi, Daltro Bertussi, Omair Trindade, Nico, Bagre, Ernesto, Neto de Paulinho Fagundes, Nardel, Adair Bueira, Edson Campanha, J.B. Batista, Nilson Léo, Newton Teixeira, Poé, Reiter, Hélio Bittencourt, Poé, Reiter, Loirinho, Petiça Preta, Ailton, Israel da Sois, Telmo Valêncio, Adelar Carniel Bertussi, Afrânio, Dom Pedro de Alcântara, João Chagas Leite, Oscarzinho, Mirins, Dionísio Clarindo, João Luiz Correia, Professor João Pedro, Maestro Valdir Teixeira, Unclinanato, Ismael Culiac, Grupo Legado Gaúcho, Beto Caetano, Endi Somene Others Vós Inames do Norte como tomai memória et this moment.
With admiration and great respect, a big and special embrace to all. Here begins a new page of this book, the Gaucho of Brazil and of the world. Other works released by the writer. From my window of time. It is spring. Gauchismo. White souls. It is summer. There are melodies in all tulips. The Gaucho. The sun rising. Adelar bertussi. The tropero of Gaucho music.
Adelar Bertussi, Complete Edition.
Adelar Bertussi, the living legend of the Pampas. I never stopped being a child, complete edition. I never stopped being a child, volume 1. Sweet childhood, the contemplation of a life. Above, far beyond the pyramids, the symphony of serenity. Once again, try to be happy. It is autumn. At my next dawn. Book of the Poets of Torres, Volume 1. The Scent of Loisier's Flowers. Coffee with Poetry, Volume 2.
Clarice Sweet Blackberry.
Midnight, Midday. The Flight of the Butterfly.
Dors, with Evandro Elias.
Permashanti.
Fleets of Time.
The Calming of Afternoons, with Azarito Orique. Poems and Portraits of Adolescence, Melissa Zanolato Dennis. The Size of Our Dreams, with Erica Borges. The Drops of a Feather, with Nilsson Leo Rochalum Mertz. The Poet and the Moonlight. The House on the Hill Road. A Little Piece of Each Memory. How to Become a Rich Person. How to Become a Rich Person, Primer Edition. Coffee with Poetry, Volume 3, Poets of Torres. To you, love messages. Without realizing it, this is how I am. What is the life of a beggar like? Italian immigration, family. Italian immigration, 1877 to 1878. Decipher me if you can. Enigma, photos of the second dimension. Dad's Tales.
My Sweet Beloved Torres.
Just try to live life. The boy who would not grow up. Do you accept yourself as you are?
Do you accept yourself?
Between backyards and silences, stories and tales of the gauchos. In the pulse of the universe. Contact with the author. Search on Spotify. All music albums by Valmir Zanelato. Search on Pexels. By Valmir Zanelato. There you will find more than 40,000 professional photos, with over 1.4 million views per month.
Search on YouTube on the following 4 channels. Valmir Zanelato Channel, Raízes Gaúcha Channel, Edici Pensar Channel, Canções da Terra Channel.
There you will find more than 50 spoken books, music videos, his 4 musical albums, short stories, poetry, audiobooks.
On Facebook, follow Valmir Zanelato.